begin to wonder whether a large part of our media haven't had their intelligence surgically removed.
No.
And it's quite plain when you look at these figures that the significant thing is the vast contrast between the numbers of so-called infections and the numbers of deaths and admissions. And you can find this abroad as well. If you go to the Worldometer's site, it will give you this in any country in the world. And looking at Spain, for instance, at the moment, where we've all been told we can't go because it's so dangerous. The daily deaths in Spain since June the 15th, when there were 8, has barely got above 3 or 1. Right. July the 3rd, they had a spike of 17, but since then it's been 3 or 4 or 1. And this is the country which in April was having daily deaths of 961. So the use of this term, infections and cases, is wholly misleading. And I just can't understand why so many of our media colleagues sit there with their mouths hanging open, their eyes goggling, swallowing this stuff.
Yeah.
You look at what's happening in Australia, where the whole city of Melbourne is under some kind of curfew. People not allowed.
Yeah, after 8 o'clock you can't go out.
And because 7 people have died, almost all of whom were over 75.
Yeah.
And it's all based, again, on the number of infections. And people are swallowing this, not merely the media, but our elected representatives, who seem to me to have gone on the most extended holiday in history, just do not seem to have any ability to question what has happened to the safety valves and brakes in our system. Where are the brakes on this thing? Is there anybody who can stop it? It seems to me that the Prime Minister himself, the power has gone to his head. Quentin Letts wrote a brilliant sketch in the Times on Saturday in which he flew off the handle, really, because he was so infuriated. Right. The Prime Minister repeatedly saying, well, you will do this, I am going to do that, with the air of some sort of megalomaniac. He's got this power, so he's going to use it. And so the next thing we know, and there are reasons to fear very much this in winter, when there will be genuine increases in influenza, which will be very hard to tell from coronavirus cases without a lot of testing. Right. There is great reason to fear that what's happening to Melbourne could happen to a major British city at some time during the coming winter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of this stuff that we read,
people will take it.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, in Germany, people will say, well, this is you read the reports of the demonstration in Berlin. They say, oh, it was all Nazis. I don't think it was all Nazis. I think in Germany, people are actually have a more recent experience of having their freedom taken away than we do, particularly in the East and in Berlin, half of which was in the East. And they're very suspicious about what's going on. And to characterize this demonstration as neo-Nazi, it seems to as some.
But unfortunately, that's the world in which we now live. By the same token, I mean, and all of this stuff, and I don't really buy it, to be honest. But I believe that it's come from somewhere inside of government, because they've leaked it to the Sunday Times to say, well, we might do this or we might do that. We might put a ring around the M25. I mean, they can't protect the beaches from people just landing on them and running into the towns.
Well, no, that's interesting, isn't it?
But they can put a ring of steel around the M25.
Well, it's fantastic, interesting contrast between the complete feebleness of both the French and the British governments over the illegal crossings of the Channel. My favourite newspaper cutting last week was a report of some of these migrants who arrived and then went and lay down and sunned themselves and took selfies until the report said until the police arrived.
I saw that.
And gave them face masks.
Yeah, excellent. So well, let's say they could go to the shops.
Have a muzzle.
Yeah.
What is this? But no, the thing about authority is that it works on those who are prepared to obey it. And in fact, what I tried to set out in a book I wrote back in 2004, The Abolition of Liberty, is that it's a strange contrast. Just as the government loses control and the police lose control of real crime and disorder, they start making life much, much more oppressive for the law-abiding. The two things actually go hand in hand.
Well, it's like the old social services, isn't it?
It is happening.
It's like the old social services. We're much more comfortable going into the homes of people who weren't really terrible miscreants with their children, but they didn't want to go anywhere near the really dangerous people because it was too dangerous.
Frightening, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're very frightening, most of the people who do those terrible things to children.
Yeah.
And you can understand, but it's so much easier to pick the low-hanging fruit of the obedient citizen who can be scared. But it's not just scared, Mike. And I was walking around in the sunshine yesterday, and in the open air, and there were people in my own city of Ulster walking around, looking quite pleased with themselves, I have to say, heads held high.
Yes.
Walking around in the streets, in the open air, in a fresh summer breeze, with muzzles on.
I know.
I saw one who'd actually muzzled up his child. I could not believe that child had any choice in this.
No.
Looked very unhappy.
Right.
And I imagine when I was a child, if someone had tied some muzzle around my face, how uncomfortable I would have felt. But this person thought he'd done something noble.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely another sign of the virtue signalling that goes on now. But I think it's best summed up as well, isn't it, Peter, the whole situation by what I said at the top of the hour, where Greater Manchester Police say that they're going to declare a serious incident, but then in the next breath say it's nothing to worry about. Well, why are you declaring a serious incident then?
I know, but again, you see, as in all these things, the slightest application of any sort of logic will show you this thing is right, but people won't do it. There's a wonderful letter in the Daily Telegraph from someone this morning. This ridiculous idea that to open the schools they're going to have to close the pubs.
Yeah.
And this intelligent lady, Kate Graham Cook of Brixham, Devon, writes that the government warns that pubs may have to close so schools can open in September. She then asks, given that children don't go to pubs and drinkers don't go to school, what is the correlation?
I know, it makes no sense. Also,
it's laughable. Well, but nobody laughs.
No,
they just take it.
No, they do, and we, the likes of us, just sit around shaking our heads. But equally, as anybody from the scientific community can tell you, they cannot find any link between any school which has opened up in any country in the world where any infection has passed from a school child to a teacher or to anybody else.
It's purely a matter of a government which claims to be conservative and all get out, whatever else it is, and is scared stiff of the teaching unions, for goodness sake.
Right. And the civil service unions.
You like about the Tory party, but they did actually once stand up to the National Union of Mine Workers, who were a much tougher proposition than any teaching union ever.
Well, this is the thing.
This won't even open this. I still am very doubtful they will get the schools open in any realistic way in September. It's August now, for goodness sake. It's nearly there.
Well, it's nearly there, and
no sign of them achieving it.
And there are plenty of teachers who are more than happy to continue to stay away because they've all been paid fully. They're not even on furlough, these people, and many of them I know have worked through it and they've tried to do homeschooling, but many of them have not. And lots of them are more than happy to keep getting paid for doing nothing.
Well, I fear so.
You know, that's the trouble. Tell us about your blood bank.
We go around this, but here's the thing. Where is the rising unpopularity of the government? Where is the dissent? I've got into a bit of a tussle this week with the blood transfusion service.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Insists that I have to wear a face nappy to give blood. Now, two things wrong with this. One, I regard this as like being forced. It's compelled speech.
Right.
To wear a declaration. I regard these things as a declaration of support for the government and its stupid policies, and I will not do it for that.
Well, do you know in Scotland you can get one that has SNP written on it?
Well, I bet you can. Yeah. But the other interesting in Scotland and in Northern Ireland and in Wales and in the Republic of Ireland too, as I've checked, you aren't allowed to wear a face muzzle while you're giving blood, because they regard it as dangerous. Because they cannot. There are two reasons why. One is that there are clear signs that someone's about to faint, which is quite dangerous when you're giving blood for all the obvious reasons, and that all those signs are concentrated on the face, particularly around the mouth. And if you can't see somebody's face, and you can't see it coming, you can't prevent it. Whereas if you can, you can. The other thing is that cold sores are a no-no with giving blood in some cases. And if people turn up wearing a muzzle, you won't see a cold sore. And so there are two dangers, and they're quite simple and practical. And all of the other blood services in these islands won't let people wear face coverings during blood donation. But the English one, completely, as far as I can see, driven by dogma, absolutely insists. And they sent a functionary to a London blood donor centre last Monday to make sure that I did not give blood on the stated time of my appointment. I was amazed to find that this functionary from head office actually had the details of the time and place of my appointment, but he did, and they said I couldn't go in. So it's extraordinary. A lot of people say, "Oh, how can you be so selfish?
Yeah.
Not giving blood?" And what? To which I reply, "Well, if you think I'm being selfish, then you go and give blood.
Yeah, right.
Make out the blood that I'm not giving. I'm fine with that. But actually, there's a principle here. I'm a volunteer donor. I think I'm entitled to some say in the circumstances in which I do this voluntary thing. And what's more, if they can push me around on this, what's next? I wouldn't be at all surprised, because some other blood services do this, if they don't introduce a ban of giving blood at 70.
Right.
Which would be ridiculous and ageist. But how is one going to protest about it if these people just get away with anything?
But again, we've found
I
ourselves...
tried for weeks privately to try and get the blood service to move on this, and they wouldn't. So that was when I went public.
Yes, because I mean the problem is, Peter, that I think we have allowed somehow, and I've been saying this lately, much to probably people's chagrin if I say it again. I never thought that I would be a white heterosexual male in my 50s and part of the counterculture, because apparently now that's what I am. Because
for me, it's good. It's great fun to be back in the counterculture. I mean, I was in the counterculture in the 60s. I've just grown a beard again to celebrate the fact
I saw
that. Now officially a dissident.
Does that count as some kind of? Can you count that as some kind of face covering officially?
No, apparently not.
No, that's a shame. But no, we seem to have this kind of ridiculous web of organisations now, which apparently run everything, who were never voted in, who somehow have become put in charge. I mean, I'm going to talk later on in this hour about this company, Serco, which I've only just discovered, run by Nicholas Soames's brother, who's the CEO. They seem to have a finger into every single pie. They run
even more than the famous Capita.
Well, I mean they're similar, but I mean I think they're even worse. They run the Docklands Light Railway. They run nuclear silo maintenance, whatever that means. They run the tagging for offenders. They transport prisoners. They run this migrant service where they're taking them and putting them up in hotels. I mean, it's quite extraordinary how many things that they do for the government, and it's all government money.
Yeah, it is very, very odd. And the Capita thing is amazing. If you complain to the BBC, which is a complete waste of time, I have to tell you, you are actually complaining to Capita, who form a sort of spongy screen around the BBC, off which all your complaints will bounce.
Right.
That's what they're for. But there's so many other things they do, like I think military recruiting, which I don't think has been going terribly well since they took it over. It's amazing how these. And there was that outfit Carillion, which crashed.
Yes.
There's another of these.
But these are all fake.
So they look like private companies, but they're not really.
No, they're entirely they're
They
entirely supported by taxpayers' money. And they're all getting very rich off the back of it, and it seems extraordinary to me that nobody's ever looked into them before.
Well, Private Eye has, which I have many criticisms of, I have to say, but has on occasion taken a look at this, and one or two others. But I agree with you; it's not been as thoroughly investigated.
It really hasn't.
No, I mean, we're part of a very strange society in which we now live, which has been completely transformed in the past 30 years, in my view.
Yes, and in fact, the establishment, as you've often said, and particularly the civil service, who are also refusing to come back to work at the moment, by the way, is entirely run by sort of the lefty academic types.
Well, it's not. It's what really happened to the civil service. The civil service neutrality was an important thing, but Margaret Thatcher began to eat away at it. But she had nothing on the Blairites and on Alistair Campbell, who was given this special power through orders in council to boss civil servants about. It was a constitutional revolution which hardly anybody protested against at the time. But this is all part of this thing that I was saying yesterday, that we are actually much less free than we were in the Cold War.
Yeah.
Partly because during the Cold War, our principal enemy was identified with repression, travel restrictions, interference in private life, and all the things which we now have in our own country. They were identified with the Soviet Union, so it was unpatriotic to be in favor of them.
Yeah.
But now that's gone. The Soviet Union seems to have arrived here. In so many aspects.
It really does.
That's why I published that picture of me.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because one of the great pictures it was really fantastic, a picture of you standing on a Polaris submarine HMS Repulse. When was that taken?
I'm guessing that would have been about 85 or 86.
Okay.
I was trying to work it out last night. In the background is the Isle of Skye, It was an amazing performance we had to go through to make the rendezvous, take a boat out and meet up. I had to clamber up the side of the submarine in quite rough conditions, which I have to say I don't recommend to anybody. I very nearly ended up in a drink.
Right.
But it was a fascinating weekend that I then had.
Right. No, it's very interesting what you say, because the world has been sort of turned upside down and turned on its head. And the government appears to be no longer the government, and the civil servants and the kind of apparatchiks appear to be advising them to do whatever it is that they do.
Well, they generally governments seek out the advice they want to hear, which is, of course, what happened most notably in the Iraq War. All those people in the system who said, don't do this, this is crazy, the people who knew about Iraq and understood the Middle East and could tell a Shiite from a Sunni Muslim and things like that, which the government couldn't. All those people were immediately, they began to say this is somewhere, they were sidelined. And the only people who were listened to were the ones who would cheer for war. And that was also very much the case in the United States. So they do this. So anybody who's against it, forget it. And so they end up in their echo chamber of people who agree with them. And that's where they are now. And unless there was serious opposition in Parliament, and unless there was serious opposition in the media, this will carry on, and it will. And unless people themselves begin to say, actually, I've had enough of this. You told me I couldn't go to I couldn't go to the bedside of my dying wife. You told me I couldn't see my grandchildren. I couldn't touch them. You told me my children couldn't go to school. You destroyed my daughter's university education. You wrecked my holidays. Now you tell me I have to go around with a nappy on my face. Is there nothing? There's no point at which the people of England who are supposed to be, or the people of Britain who are supposed to have stood up for freedom, is there no point at which they will say that
we will make America great again.